tapes of other textbooks. I mentioned this in another lecture. Give them tapes or recordings, or we don't have tapes nowadays. Give them recordings of other beginners level textbooks. The topics are probably the same: buying things, ordering food, introducing yourself, asking directions. But the order in the dialogues, the vocabulary is slightly different, and that gives the challenge to the student. But they can listen to them in the safety of their home. And this is going to strengthen their listening ability. You see, the problem is they probably listen to the tape of the textbook that you're using lots and lots of times. There's no more challenge. But if you could give them tapes, recordings of other textbooks that are also beginners level textbooks, that's going to give them a bit of a challenge. They can listen to them in the safety and security of their home. Auditory learners, they're easier. They want a teacher who allows the students to talk. You shouldn't just be lecturing to them, allowing the students to talk. You need activities that have that, maybe role play, discuss the story, encourage the students to make friends with local people. There's a principle here in teaching that TTT, teacher talking time, should be as little as possible, and STT, student talking time, should be as much as possible. You find, particularly with newer teachers, they're talking all the time. But the good teacher focuses on how can I get the student talking as much as possible. STT, allowing them to talk, not just to write. Now, the hands-on student, they need very much allowing the student to move around, to bring the objects into the classroom. I mean, there's certain objects you can't bring into the classroom. For instance, if the lesson is a trip to the zoo, well, then use the flashcards. Spends plenty of time on the activity, and particularly takes the students outside to practice. The classroom for this sort of learner should be in the community. That's the way they learn best. Okay? That's to do with the senses. Now finally, oh, sorry, this is interesting. I got this from a book. Let's just look at this very briefly. Other physical factors. You can go through this with your student. Time. What time of day do you learn best? Morning, afternoon, evening. In China, in university programs, the Chinese lessons for foreigners are normally 8 o'clock in the morning to 12 noon. And maybe your student is not at their brightest and best at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's helpful for them to think through what time of day do they learn best. Posture. Do you prefer to sit in a straight back chair at your desk or in the library, or do you prefer a comfortable chair, or even laying on your bed or on the floor? One of the most gifted language learners that I know, he can speak more than 10 languages and was fluent in Mandarin easily within a year. He actually did most of his preparation for class laying on his bed in the evening. Okay? What posture? Surroundings. Do you prefer your study room or your desk to be messy, or do you have to tidy it up before you can start work? Lighting. Do you prefer bright lights or soft lights? Clothing. In class, do you prefer to dress formally or informally, more casually? Here are a few more. Sound. Do you prefer to study in a quiet place or with background music? I remember I had a Chinese friend who used to stay at our home each weekend and used to come in and say, "Where's the radio? I want to do some study." And I couldn't understand that. When I study something, I want absolute quiet. But this person had to have some background music playing if they were going to study. We're all different, aren't we? Companions, this is important. Do you prefer to study alone or together with other students? Obviously, the more analytical prefers to study alone. Do you prefer to study with other students? That's a good way to study. Mobility. Do you prefer sitting down at your desk to study or frequently moving around? We had one gifted language learner. He had a chair in the bedroom, then the sofa in the sitting room, and another chair on the veranda. And when he's preparing for class, he used to move from one to the other. He used to move from one to the other. Temperature. Do you like the study room or classroom to be warm or cool? Sustenance. Do you like to eat and drink while studying or not? And finally, rewards. Do you promise yourself rewards for getting started on your studies, for finishing? I often think we should reward ourselves as much as possible when we're learning a difficult language like Chinese. Finish a lesson, go out and buy an ice cream or something. Finish a textbook, go out and have a really nice meal and celebrate. We should reward ourselves as much as possible. It's going to make us feel good. Okay? These are interesting, aren't they? And go through them with your student. If at first you don't succeed, find out why. I think that's what learning styles are telling us. If there's a clash, if there's something not working, like teacher Ge, find out where the problem is. Go through that questionnaire, the student and yourself, and see where there's a clash of teaching styles and learning styles. If at first you don't succeed, find out why. Okay, now finally we're now going to look at personality. And I haven't given you a questionnaire, but if you're able to go online and look at the Myers-Briggs test, personality test, Myers-Briggs personality test, you can do it free online, then that will be helpful. It'll give you 4 letters. Now, if you can't, it doesn't matter. We'll go through it now, and I think you're going to get the idea anyway. And what we want to think about is, as regards personality, what sorts of personality are helpful for language learning and what might hinder language learning. Okay? Let's first look at extrovert, oriented to the outer world of action, active, trial and error, sociable, loves relating to people. Is there another one? No. Yes. So we all know, oh yes, if only I was an extrovert, I'd be able to get the language well. But what makes the extrovert a good language learner? There's really 2 things. One, they're willing to have a go. They're willing to take risks. And the second thing is that they're sociable. They love relating to people. They very quickly have a wide circle of friends. They may not be deep relationships, but they have a wide circle, then shall we say, of acquaintances. And these 2 things, being a risk taker, trial and error, be willing to have a go, and being sociable, loves relating to people, these 2 are huge strengths when it comes to learning a language. What about, and scan the environment for stimulation. Well, let's move on to the next one. Introvert. Is it bad being an introvert when it comes to language learning? Well, no, it's not all bad. Let's look at it. Oriented to the inner world of one's private thoughts and reflections, likes concepts and ideas, prefers working alone, thinks deeply before acting. The good thing about the introvert is that they're willing to work hard, to focus on what they're doing. The problem is that because they don't talk a lot, they have to meet vocabulary words much more than the extrovert. You see, the extrovert, because they have to talk, they're forcing recall all the time. Where the introvert, because they're not talking so much, if they're high IQ, if they have an excellent memory, that's okay. But if not, they have to work really hard at their studies, keep going over the vocabulary again and again in order to get it in. That's extrovert versus introvert. Now let's look at another pair. Intuition. Is intuition good for language learning? Let's have a look. Flashes of insight, future possibilities, creative imagination, intuitive impressions, inspirational thoughts, looking for the big picture. I think that's the last one. Oh no, one more. Seeing patterns and interwoven relationships. Is intuition good for language learning? Yes, because they grasp wholes. They don't get bogged down with the details of the grammar or whatever it is. They see wholes, total picture, and that's excellent for language learning. Now, the opposite of the intuitives are the sensing, practical people who gather information by observing the physical world around them through sights, sound, and touch. Prefers reality over theory, remembers facts and practical details, and common sense application of knowledge put to practical use. The good thing about the sensing person is that they pay attention to the details. That's good. That's going to be helpful, paying good attention to the details. Also, especially if your learner is learning Chinese because they want to use it to live in China, to build friendships with Chinese people, maybe even to do a job, the S's are very practically minded people, and so your learner is going to say, oh yes, learning Chinese is really useful. I'll be able to use it, I'll be able to apply it to living in China and building friendships. So that's going to motivate this sort of person, practical learning for living. So that's good. Now let's look at another pair. Myers-Briggs calls it T, and I'm using the word principles. Let's look at these. The high T, impartial, analytical, firm-minded, impersonal principles, weighs facts objectively, sense of fairness and justice. And what I want to ask is, in China, in Asia, are these qualities appreciated or the opposite? Or skilled applying of logical analysis, sorry, I've got that. Feelings, this is the opposite. Trusting, desire for harmony, subjective personal values, consequences as they affect people, warm and empathetic in personal relationships. Are these the qualities that Chinese people, that Asians appreciate more? And the answer, of course, is yes, they are. So the high F person has a real advantage because Chinese people are going to warm to them much more readily than the high T, who is principled, firm-minded, always talking about fairness and justice and whatever it is. So the high F is a real advantage. The high T needs to learn, as I like to say, to have some more F about them. Finally, the final pair, Myers-Briggs calls it P. Doesn't matter what it stands for. I like to use the word open. The high P, they like variety, flexibility. They like change. They like new, novelty, spontaneous. Keep option opens, open. Now, is that good for language learning? Definitely. Because they'll just happily press on with learning Chinese. And they'll say to themselves, okay, I don't really completely understand it now, but I'm sure it'll become clearer later on. Where the opposite, Myers-Briggs uses J, I like to use the word closed, they have targets, they're great planners, they're goal-oriented, desire closure, decision-making, orderly sequence, organizing and scheduling. What I like to say is the difference between the P and the J, the open and closed, is that if a J calls the travel agent and wants to book an air ticket, they'll say to the travel agent, I want to go on this date and I want to come back on that date. Where the open, the high P, they'll call the travel agent and say, I want to go on this date, but leave the return date open because plans might change. Now, is this bad for language learning? Well, the good thing, let's talk about the good thing about this sort of learner is, are they ready for class? Oh yes. If the teacher asks them to write an essay and bring it to class on Monday, will they have it ready on Monday? Oh yes. They'll probably have it ready on Saturday or Sunday. Okay? So they're always prepared well for class. And that's good, isn't it? That's good. The problem with these people, because I'm one of these people, I'm an extreme on this, is they like to have deadlines and dates, desire closure, and they keep saying, when can I say I've finished learning Chinese? Give me a date, this year, next year, the year after. And of course there is no date. So these people have to learn to live with that. With learning languages, you've never finished. Where the high P, the open person, can accept that, So finally, two things. No one learning style is better than another. When I meet a teacher who insists this is the way one ought to teach languages, I remember once meeting a teacher who said that. Probably the way they feel one ought to teach languages, just like 葛老师, is actually the way that they like to learn languages. But what learning styles tells us is we're all different. We're all different. There's no one way to learn languages. And that's why we have to cooperate with our students, as well as at times challenge our students. No one learning style is better. And finally, from time to time, students will need to strengthen their weak areas by stepping out of their comfort zone, and we need to let them know that. So as I said again, the good teacher knows when to cooperate and when to challenge. I hope you found this helpful.